Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. It's great looking out my picture window into just a gorgeous October afternoon with peak foliage in the woods and everything else going on. So it's a great time of year out here.
It is. We're heading into fall in New England, and the trees are starting to look it, as opposed to in California, where I heard they hit 90 degrees over the weekend. So hopefully you're enjoying the weather wherever you are. So today we've got a special guest. Chip and I have often talked about the need when you're putting together a project, you have to start with the end in mind. And for most of us, that end is retirement. So with us today is Derek Mazzarella. He's a certified financial professional, and he has got a new book out called Just Retire Already. And Derek, welcome. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, gentlemen, thank you for having me. Name is Derek Mazzarella. I'm a certified financial planner. Basically, I went to Bryant University and graduated in 2007. And my first job out of college was actually with Aflac. Most people know it from all the duck commercials. But for me, it was a lot of cold calling and getting quacked at and selling some supplemental insurance. But then I was able to through networking. So this shows the power of networking, where you can end up. I was working with a financial advisor there, and he said, "Why don't you come join us?" So I did in 2009, basically right after the market crash. So for me, everything was up, in the market. So I was doing a great job. But then I kind of bounced around a little bit and ended up here in Connecticut. I lived in Boston for about 13 years, and then in 2020, right before the pandemic. So obviously, timing's my strong suit. We moved to Connecticut here and been here since February 1st of 2020.
Fantastic. So what made you decide to write the book?
Honestly, it was really, it really had to do with the table. I had this goal a couple years ago to just not watch TV at night as much as I was doing. So my mom said, "Hey, I got this table for you. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Sure." It was $100. I finished it up. I was like, I need to finish the chair. So I had a project every night. And then when I was done with that, I was like, I think I need another project. And I kind of had this idea for this book in my head because, being a financial advisor, you see a lot of books and a lot of research go on about how to build wealth, but not a lot of people talk about how to actually take that money that you built over your life and spend it down effectively in retirement. And I don't know if you guys know this, but most financial books are pretty dry and boring. So I thought, well, can I make a book that's a little funnier and easy to read and understand? So at night for about an hour, because I have two kids, a 5 and a 2-year-old, and they both love my wife apparently more than me. So they want her to put them to bed. So I had an hour to myself. So I thought, let me just chip away at this thing. So I spent about an hour a night for 10 months working on the book.
Excellent. And what made you decide to focus the book on retirement and, again, the end in mind?
Yeah, well, I think, most folks, when it comes to planning, just get in the car and drive like you're going on vacation, right? But the first thing when you do when you go on vacation is actually figure out where you want to go. And a lot of my clients tend to be clients where they have 2 kids or 3 kids and they just finished graduating college and now they're focused on retirement. So a lot of my conversations around retirement with these clients was thinking about, okay, what are the challenges that we're going to face? How are we going to get there? Are you on track? The common questions we ask. So, I found myself repeating myself with these things a lot. And I noticed that not a lot of people know really what goes into retirement. So I really want to try and help kind of demystify what retirement was like and, what goes into it and what you should watch out for. So that kind of led me to write the book. I thought there was a gap between all the, hey, here's the investment books out there. They're the buy the Bitcoin books. There wasn't too many books on how to retire effectively, I found.
Nice. Yeah, we talk a lot about goal setting. And in fact, I often quote Yogi Berra, who said, if you don't know where you're going, be careful. You might not get there.
Yeah.
And that is so important with retirement. You actually need to understand what you want from retirement in order to put a plan together.
Exactly, Eric. I think the biggest misconception is, you remember those old ING commercials where people had a number over their head and they're like, well, what's your number? So I think people have this connotation where, oh, when I get to $1 million or $2 million or 1.675 million, whatever that number is, they'll be fine. But really, retirement is about really designing your lifestyle first. So you should really look at, okay, what is my day going to look like? What am I going to do that's going to provide value for myself personally and fulfillment? And then really work backwards from there. It shouldn't really be about how much money you have in your IRA or 401k account.
Well, in terms of having that number, I mean, we've seen over the last couple of years runaway inflation. Doesn't that number change over time?
Yeah, I actually do bring this up in the book because inflation is one of the big factors and one of the big risk factors in retirement. Because, I mean, especially look at 2022 and inflation hit over 9%. At that rate, that greatly erodes wealth. So you got to figure, I mean, the average withdrawal rate is about 4%. I mean, you could give or take, that with a grain of salt, but let's throw 9% on top of that. Now you're really withdrawing, 13% of your assets. Is that really where you want to be? And how would that compound over the years? So think about how that could really erode your wealth. So you really have to think about what that number is going to be and what it could be in the future.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I'm kind of going through all of this right now. I mean, I'm age 69 and my wife is retired. We're both involved in a bunch of different things anyway, but we've had a financial planner for several years. And obviously, one of the most important things you have to deal with your clients is it's a whole lot more than just money. It's all about what's important to you, what do you want to do, and so on and so forth. That's really, really important. And then I love your promo, which says, in these uncertain times, planning for retirement requires knowledge that we've never been taught. And your value added here is that this empowers readers to take control over their retirement, enabling them to withstand the retirement challenges that are bound to come along, from rising healthcare costs to inflation, taxes, and fluctuation in the stock market. And you just mentioned a few of these as far as withdrawal rates and this and that, whatever. But it's all about the whole picture. And most important, I'm sure what you have to preach to them is patience, because every day you're going to see alarms about this and, oh, great, the stock market's been up for the last month and so on and so forth. But it's all about the long-term picture, what you got there, what the growth rates are going to be and where you're at. And most importantly, when we get to be our age, which is tough for us to do, even though we know that we can do it, what our financial planner says, look, enjoy your money. You've earned it. Plan the vacations, plan this, plan that, and whatever, because obviously you want to leave some things for your kids and your grandchildren and so on and so forth. But you don't have to be a miser about it all the time. So there's so many pieces that go into that. So I'm sure that the book is very, 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 very entertaining. But obviously, retirement and just working with a financial planner is so much more than just all about the money. And I know a lot of people are reluctant to work with financial planners because that's what they think it's about, and they don't want to share that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, we grew up in a society where talking about money was very taboo. Like, I mean, did you talk about money with your parents? Probably not. I mean, I probably did more than most people, but I know a lot of folks struggle with, really looking through and being open about how much they make and what they have and what their goals are. And, I think a good financial advisor would really help you understand what you want to get out of life, and then also show you the roadmaps to get there. Because I think the big challenge I've seen with a lot of clients is, when you stop working, you're like, this is all the money I have. And you really fear, well, if I spend too much, am I going to run out? And when you don't do any planning, it's really hard to know, well, how much can you spend and how much can you do over time? And what's the breaking point of your plan? So I think really kind of drilling down and figuring out, all right, what are my basic needs and what are my fun needs? Because you don't want to just sit there in retirement on the couch all day watching TV. You'll just rot, right? So you want to make sure you're really planning around your lifestyle and your goals and your budget and, all that stuff. That's very important.
It is very important to have a plan. You mentioned you don't want to be sitting around in front of the TV. And we've actually mentioned this on previous podcasts, where people, once they retire, when they don't have activities, when they're not doing things, their health deteriorates, their mental cognition deteriorates. That's all things that have to be taken into account when you're planning for retirement.
Oh, absolutely. I think anytime you hear someone talk about their grandparent that lived to 95, they'd say, oh, they were still going uphill and hiking or driving or meeting their friends or blah, 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 you name it. They all had something to look forward to. You need that sense of purpose whether you're working or you're retired, because that's going to carry you through. And if it's, valuing family time, then, make sure you focus on it. If it's valuing picking up new hobbies, then do that. If it's volunteering, do that. I think it's, really important though, to pick and choose what you really want to get out of the rest of your life, because it's another phase. It doesn't have to be the end phase.
Yeah. And now that phase is getting longer and longer. I mean, now the average person lives into their late 80s, assuming you retire at 65. That's a good chunk of time that you're going to have to be spending, not just sitting in front of the TV.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a stat out there that I threw in the book that basically if you're a couple and you're 65 years old, there's basically a greater than 50% chance that one of you is going to live to 90. So if you retire at 65, that's a 25-year span that we have to account for and plan for. And, to your point, one of the big risks that I talk about in the book was inflation. And the other thing is longevity. So the longer you live, it's going to compound all of those other risks. So it's going to compound and impacts inflation. There's going to be more market drops because those typically happen every 6.5 years. So if you live 30 years versus 20 years in retirement, those are, one or two more market drops you have to account for. So that the longevity piece is really important to figure out. I mean, I had a great grandma lived 105 and I had a grandfather lived 100. So I hopefully will plan, knock on wood, for a long retirement. And some of you may listen to this may hear the same thing and say, oh, I have some longevity in my family too. So it's really important to think about, okay, what assets do we have that'll carry us through our rest of our life? Because most people don't have pensions anymore. So those were a good backstop for most folks of older generations that retired years ago that knew they had money coming in every single month other than just Social Security. So it's important to really think about where you're going to draw that source of income from.
Yeah, it is important. And something I think most people don't realize is that back in the late 30s, when the government decided age 65 was the routine retirement age, the average lifespan was 62.
Right.
So, they weren't worried about retirement so much.
No, I think even then, if people got past 65, the average lifespan was 2 more years after that. So it wasn't even longer, right? So they were basically counting on you using 2 years of Social Security payments.
Exactly.
A little bit longer than that now.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see when people start thinking about retirement?
I think I would say the two biggest ones I looked at, I think, are around Social Security, since we're already talking about over 50% of the people that take Social Security take it earlier than age 65. So with the way Social Security works, there's a time called full retirement age. For most people, it'll be between 66 and 67. So that's when you get your full benefit. More than half the people are taking this benefit earlier, thinking, hey, if I get an extra paycheck or two here, it's going to make up for the lack of payment down the line. If, we're talking about longevity, most people living past 80, that could be a negative impact long-term on them. The other thing that people aren't really doing well at all is tax planning. Taxes are one of the biggest eroders of wealth that we have. They're always going to be there. And if you look at our tax rates now, they're historically low. If you project them out in the future, do you guys know what our highest tax rate was before in America's history?
I believe it was 88%.
Chip, do you have a guess?
That's a lot higher than I would have thought.
It was actually 94, Eric. You were close.
Okay.
It was, in 1945 and 46. So it was right after the war. Obviously, we had a pretty big bill to pay for. And, right now, the highest marginal tax bracket is nowhere near that. It's in the high 30s. So, I came across a stat reading the book, and it was basically that the number one tax tool that people have, or tax planning tool they have, is absolutely doing nothing. 19% of respondents of this survey said their plan was to do absolutely nothing on taxes. So I think we're really missing the boat on tax planning and retirement. And that can be simple stuff like, invest now in a Roth, invest in an investment account, invest in a pre-tax 401k or IRA, because having multiple tax buckets lets you pull different levers in retirement. Because let's say you need a roof redone 30 years from now, you have to pull out $40,000 or $50,000. Are you going to pull all of that out of a pre-tax IRA where all that's going to be taxed? Now your tax rate goes up. Now your Medicare rates go up. So it can have this ripple effect that you may not think of. You're saving taxes today, but let's project out 30 years. What does that look like over the course of your retirement? So those are some of the areas I see people really kind of missing the boat on.
Yeah, I know. I mean, obviously, in our situation, we have children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. And, we'd like to give some things away earlier and so on and so forth. So planning where your investments are to kind of bucket all that is so important. And these days, I know as a financial planner, because we've been dealing with them for a few years, the tools that you have now for the people that you're using to invest the money or the holdings and so on and so forth, they're right there so that you can, I mean, I can go in with a push of a button and look at everything that we got going on. And so can you. And when you're planning with people, you can play all the what ifs right in front of them. You know, what they do with us is if the inflation rate is going to be this and the growth rate's this, and they do all these different scenarios to kind of help you do that. And this is one of the advantages, again, of sitting down with my financial planner, because they have all these different tools to play all these what if games with you. And that, I'm sure, helps you to guide people in planning out what's the best way to go. So.
Oh, absolutely, Chip. We had my old planning software wasn't even as up to date as this now, and it spent me, for a client, I was trying to determine how much to save taxes in retirement, and do we do Roth conversions now or later, or can we even do them? Does it make sense? And I think I spent like maybe 4 to 5 hours just doing that one piece of it, and now I can do it basically with a click of a button, and it'll detail. All right, this year convert $5,622. Next year convert $7,227, and it gives you a whole map and tells you, okay, by doing this, we'll project you'll save $50,000 in taxes over your retirement. So it's very comprehensive, the tools we have now, and they're so much better than Excel sheet. So, I'd argue if you guys are at home or are doing everything on Excel sheet, there's a lot of things you're missing out on.
Yeah, I don't miss having to put all those formulas into Excel sheets.
No, not to mention what the trends are and the laws and so on. Because I mean, again, at my age, there's a certain point in time where right now we're kind of cruising. However, we have to switch our structure because our tax rates all of a sudden are going to go up, and we're going to be paying a lot bigger rate. So what we have to do is make sure that our mix then is better prepared for doing that kind of things. And if we're going to use money now as opposed to later on, pull it out of this bucket instead of that bucket.
Yeah, I mean, Chip, you bring a great point. I think most people don't pay attention to, okay, I've got these different buckets of accounts. What do I pull from? And deciding which ones to take from at what time can be really important. Like I've projected to save clients $200,000 in taxes by just kind of doing that. And to your point, I don't think most people realize it, but we have a kind of a tax bomb ticking. In 2026, the Tax Cuts and Job Act is going to expire, and all the rates are going to go up. The standard deduction is going to go down. The estate planning limits are going to drop pretty significantly, pretty much in half. So there's a lot of tax things you could do now to prep for that. And I think most people aren't paying enough attention to those types of things and saying, okay, they're always looking at how I save taxes today, but not really looking at the full picture.
Yeah. And people with the portfolios where you can do this is you're able to move the money around to maximize the benefits now and have the hedge going for later on, knowing that you're going to be moving things over there later on. So again, that's part of the modern technology. It's right to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I even talk about simple things like tax location. It's like, if you went over your friend's house and you saw some milk in the cabinet and he's like, hey, you want some milk? You'd be like, what are you doing with that in there? You think they're weird. But a lot of people put assets in the wrong type of account. Like, they're putting, high dividend or fixed income accounts and investment accounts when they should be putting them in IRAs. So paying attention to those things is also important, because those little wins kind of add up over time.
Yeah. And obviously you got people who want more risk for more gain and other people who want to be ultra conservative, and you're dealing with those things too. So there's a mix on those facets also.
Yeah. Well, there's the math side of it and the behavior side. Like if I do this or that, I know this client can handle this risk, but I know this client wouldn't. So you have to kind of adjust your plan to fit, where your clients are.
Yeah, that's actually an important point, is that two clients with the same amount of assets can be very different people in terms of risk, in terms of, how much they can handle, how much, how nervous they get. How do you deal with things like that?
Well, a lot of it is what you can handle from a psychology standpoint. So one of the kind of tools I use especially for retirees is called, bucketing your money out. So for example, you bucket based on time frame. Because stock markets will drop, like I said, every 6.5 years or so. And when they do, it's usually about over 20%. And typically it takes around 2 years to recover. So generally they'll point and say, like, okay, let's have 2 years in cash. So mentally, if there's a drop, we know you're covered and we can deal with it. The problem with being in too much cash, if you're too conservative, to your point, Eric, inflation can erode wealth. So if you're too conservative, that's where you need to push clients, say, hey, look, we need to combat these different risks in retirement. So this is going to be the market risk bucket for us. then we have a medium bucket for midterm stuff, and then we have a long-term bucket to beat inflation and to grow your wealth and let you pull extra money out if the market does well over time, which it generally does. So a lot of it is, depending on the client, sometimes you have to de-risk them a little bit. Some clients you have to push on risk. I think a lot of it is just kind of educating them on here's the pros and cons, and here's what you give up by either being too risky or too conservative. And that's, as much as you can do from hey, let's give your investment a job. I think that's probably the most important thing, in letting clients say, okay, this is the goal of this pocket of money, and then investing it based on that, not necessarily just on, well, I don't want to be risky. Give it a job and make sure it's doing the job.
And risk should change over time. I mean, if you're looking at a macro view, the stock market, bond market, they all tend to go up over the long period of time. So if you're investing for retirement at, say, age 25 or 30, you should be able to take more risk than if you're in your 50s and you're planning on retiring at 65.
Oh, exactly. I think, when you're younger, you should definitely be riskier. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, though, is you should just always constantly de-risk as you age. Really, when you're looking at retirement, the riskiest time for your retirement is the 5 years before and the 5 years after you retire. Because if you have a huge drop within that time frame, it can really impact your portfolio moving forward. I mean, if you're 82 years old and you have a market drop, it's not going to necessarily kill you because you may only have 5 or 6 years left. But if you get a huge drop when you're 65 and you're trying to make that money last 25 years, that's a different story. So I think people really need to be aware of that. It's called a retirement red zone. I've heard it phrased as aware of that time frame and figuring out, okay, well, how do I protect my retirement assets during that time frame so they can last those 25 plus years?
So what would you say to younger people that say, oh, well, I really can't afford to invest. I'm struggling to pay my bills. How should they be looking at their finances?
Great question, Eric. Actually, very timely. So I did some research and I saw, okay, what would it take to make $1 million if you started at 25 versus 35 versus 45 versus 55, right? So a 25-year-old would have to save about $381 a month. They would have to save over $1,000 basically if they're at 45. If they waited till they were 35, if they were 45, they would have to save 400% more at 45 than they would at 25. So while it may be hard, trust me, I've been there, but if you could even save a little bit, whether it's $20, $50, $100 a month, just do it, because compound is going to do a lot of work for you, because otherwise it's going to be expensive on the back end. Because we always have this, when I make X, I'll be able to afford it. But I think, as guys know, life gets busy as you age. And, if you've heard of Parkinson's law, the space is going to get filled by how big the room is. So if you make more money, most people tend to, spend that. So it's really challenging for people to grow their wealth or grow their income and assume that I'm going to be able to save like I'm spending now. Because if you're making $200,000, you're not spending, $500 a month on rent anymore. I guarantee you're moving to a nicer place.
So what should people be thinking about to start getting the retirement process moving forward?
Well, I think the big thing you need to figure out, the first thing I was saying is like we said with the vacations, pick where you're going to go, pick what it's going to look like. What do you envision your retirement looking like? And just write it down. Even if you're 30, just think about it. Like, what do I want my retirement to look like? Do I want to be at a beach? Do I want to be visiting family? Map that out. And I think the other thing is, we have a really large target. It's like, what's the weather going to be like next year? Like, I don't know. It's going to be rainy or snowy, but I know July is going to be warmer than, December. But just start saving. I would say, what can you start to automate your savings? The 401k match is great. So if you have a 401k with a match, absolutely take advantage of it. You're getting typically 100% rate of return right off the bat. If I got that for all my clients, I would have a statue of me outside the building here, because I've been so good at returns. So get that, take advantage of it. And then just systematically save, because ideally you want to save about 15 to 20% of your income. Doesn't all have to be in a 401k plan or a retirement plan, but you want to have that mix of savings. So if you're not there yet, don't freak out. Just work your way there over time. Even if you're just increasing it 1% per year, you will eventually get there. That's what I would really say. I think you just have to start. And if you think it's too big of an undertaking, what's the smallest thing you could do? Right? What's the smallest first step, and just do that.
All right. So we are coming up on the end of our time. So for our listeners that would like to get a hold of your book, where can they get it?
You can get it almost any major retailer, so it's available on Walmart, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But if you go to my website, justretirealready.com, you'll be able to buy whatever bookstore you would like to buy it at.
All right. And if they'd like to get a hold of you for more information or financial services, how can they do that?
Sure. They can email me at dmazzarella@mygfpartner, or you can go to the Just Retire Already website. Also has a work with me section on the About Me page, so feel free to reach out there. Otherwise, you can also follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. You can connect with me there.
Fantastic. Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for this week?
Well, first of all, I think it's really, really important for everybody when they're young to get a financial advisor right off the front, because basically, it's one word for an advisor, but what you really are is a coach. And everybody needs a coach to get them through, because coaches know a whole lot more about what you're trying to achieve than you do. And talking about starting to save right now, I mean, you use the examples, but there's a book out there, I believe it's by Jeff Olson, called The Slight Edge. And basically it's doing one little thing every day to get better. Like if you want to lose a whole bunch of weight, instead of just going on a binge diet and whatever, and basically stop snacking every day, start taking a walk, and so on and so forth. But he used an example at the very beginning. If you had a choice of getting a penny today and doubling that every day for a month, as opposed to getting $1 million today, what would you take? And most people are going to say, oh, give me the $1 million. A cent today is 2 tomorrow and 4, blah, 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 blah. By the time you get to the end of that month, it's like doubling from 15 to $30 million just by doing the same whole thing every day. So getting into the habit when you're young and basically saying this is untouchable is so, so important. Fortunately, we're in a good spot right now, but to you folks who are young out there and you don't know what's going to be going on with the future, that's the most important advice. Get yourself an advisor and start putting it away.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is that you have to do your planning holistically. It's not just about the money. It's about how you want to be spending your time, where you want to be spending your time. And, it all ties in, because if you want to be traveling, if you want to be doing a lot, that's going to affect how much money you need and what the planning is going to look like. So I think it's very important that people look at retirement holistically and think of it as what could be another quarter of your life. It's a lot longer than people think. So I think that's really the big takeaway for me is, start your planning, but look at the big picture, all of it all together, because every little piece is going to affect the rest of the picture. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.